What is up, YouTube? My name is Alex, better known as Schwibbs in the poker world, and I recently won a WSOP online circuit event. It was a $215 buy-in that I won for 16.7K. It was my biggest score ever. I also won a gold ring, which is the first time I ever won hardware for a tournament, and an entry into the $1 million free roll tournament of champions at the WSOP in Vegas this summer. It will be my first time in Vegas, so a lot of firsts for me. I was also streaming this event. It was a very surreal experience. I got raids from the Pennsylvania and Michigan community, as well as a raid from All in Pav on a Sunday with almost 1,000 people. Are you kidding me? It was unbelievable. I barely remember these hands, so going through these hands today should be pretty interesting, but I'm excited to do it. And one last note, if you guys haven't heard of tsrpoker.com, go check us out. We're a poker organization focused around content creation and poker coaching. So if you like what you see today, go check out the website. You'll probably like more of what's on the website. But with that being said, let's jump into the hands. Okay, so this first part will be from the very beginning of the tournament. I'm only going to go through like the really big hands because there were quite a lot of them. Also, this replayer on WSOP is not something I'm used to using. So unfortunately you will see the result of the hand when I bring up each one. But we'll go through and kind of look to see where I could have played better or what I did that was good or whatever. So pretty excited for this. So let's get into it. So we see a 3x raise under the gun and a call. I would always squeeze pretty big here with this hand, something to the tune of 4x. So like I would usually go 3x the initial raise and then add in the call too. It looks like my squeeze size was a little bit big here, but not terrible. I think like making it 2K makes sense. This is a little big, but I think it's okay. So we see a cold call behind, not something I'm really used to seeing all that much. For me personally, I usually play 4-better fold here, but I think a lot of players will flat hands like jacks and 10s and 9s here and like ace queen suited, king queen suited, stuff like that. And then we see the cascade of calls come behind, and so we go to a flop of queen 4-3 two-tone. The action does not check to me. This player bets. If the action were to check to me, I would just always check it back. I would not really bluff this board 4 ways in a squeezed pot. I wouldn't bluff with this hand, I mean to say. So facing this bet, I'm gonna fold as well in a 4-way pot with no real backdoor draw. Even if I had ace king of hearts, I'd probably still fold and really only play like ace king of diamonds here. And then plus obviously over pairs, which I have a lot of, top pairs, which I have a lot of, top set. So pretty easy hand here, I think, but it was a decently sized pot, so I figured I would show it. But with that, we can keep going. Let's see. When's the next big one? This ace king. So I raised to 2.2x off of about 27 bigs maybe. Almost 30 bigs, I guess. I can't do math, so don't ask me. Yeah, about 30 bigs. We see a small blind flat, and then the big blind folds. And we get to this flop. And the small blind leads out for pot here. I'm pretty comfortable not defending this type of a hand and just defending when I have a spade or ace king of hearts. And I think that's pretty clean. I'm not used to, like, I don't encounter this pot size lead very much. But when it happens, I think my defending strategy here is pretty clean. So just always folding ace king, like this exact combo of ace king, I'm pretty comfortable with. So next hand, this was a pretty big one. I think kind of standard. I don't know, people might be a little uncomfortable with this. Basically, we see a min raise in early position, and I have, was this like 25 bigs, maybe 24 bigs. And so I just shipped in the 9s here. I think it's totally reasonable. And then we win the flip versus ace king. Flopping a set is always nice. So we can keep going. Let's see. see, what was this one? So here I just jammed about 10 big blinds in the cutoff. I think pretty easy play, and I just got it through. This was the very next hand. I should just do this. So we see min raise here from like early to middle-ish position, and I have, I don't know, 12 bigs. To be honest, I don't think I would recommend this to a friend. I think this is a bit too loose. And like if I was playing this spot right now, I'd probably just fold just because the raise came from too early of a position. Now, if we were more like, button cutoff, I'd be really comfortable with it, but I just don't think I have that much fold equity here at all. And I don't think I'm that ahead of the opening range. So for those reasons, I'd probably fold. But I jammed, got called, sucked out. That might be a theme for today. We'll see. But yeah, that was that hand. Keep going with the ace-10. So I raise in the low jack. We see the button flat. And the big blind come along. And then we see this board. So here, 3 ways. I am going to check quite a bit here. If I think about some of my hands like king-queen or pocket queens, those hands really don't benefit from betting at all. So I would just always check those types of hands. And I think I want to protect my checking range as well sometimes. Now, is this like the exact hand I want to do it with? Maybe not. Maybe I want to do like, ace-5 of diamonds. So like a weaker ace, but also has some backdoor potential. Maybe ace-10 is just too good and I should just bet this hand always. But my betting range here is going to look like an ace or better or complete air, like jack-10 or something. So that's kind of what I'm up to here. So I check, button checks it back. See that turn, and then this player checks. At this point, I'm definitely going to bet for value. There are straight draws and flush draws, and I think I can call by worse one-pair hands. I think I'd want to keep the sizing small, maybe something to the tune of like a third or a half, but I don't think I would want to go bigger than a half too often. I'm curious to see what I did here. Yeah, so a third. I'm not too surprised by the sizing. I think it works pretty well, and both players fold. So with that, we can keep going. So we got king, queen, raise in early position, 3-bet. Oh yeah, the only reason I'm showing this is just because it kind of speaks to my point I was making earlier, but I don't have a cold calling range versus 3-bets, especially in these positions. I think some players would be tempted with a hand like this, or ace-queen, or jacks, 10s, 9s, like I've already said. But I just play pretty much like 4-bet or fold here, so that's the only reason I included this one. This was a pretty big hand, and one I think I played pretty poorly. I actually remember this one, and maybe that's why, because I knew I played it poorly. So pre-flop is where I think the biggest mistake comes in, and maybe the only mistake. I raise here, which is essentially the cutoff because the button is sitting out. So this player is the button, and I'm the cutoff. And so this player 3-bets me. And generally what I think about here, how deep are we? Like 20 big blinds deep. So generally I want to fold about half of my opening range, and my opening range is going to be like 36% of hands. It's going to be pretty wide, but even though that's the case, I still think I should fold queen jack off, and just continue with hands that are better than this. I think like calling here is, in the long run, I think going to lose me quite a bit of money. So it's not something I would want to repeat. But that's something I did. And so we catch this flop, and I just, check shove. I think that's pretty standard, easy play. Even worst case scenario, if the player, I guess worst case scenario is that they have queens, but even if they have kings or aces, I still have a lot of equity. I think we're basically flipping against aces, so. And we are flipping, and then I get there, which again, is going to be a pretty common theme of this video, but that was a pretty big hand that, again, I think I played poorly, but is important to highlight. Oh yeah, this one I would definitely highlight. This one I remember this from the session too. So this just when I raised an early position and the small blind called. So heads up pot, single raise pot versus the small blind. On this board, even though it's paired, it interacts with this range quite heavily. So it's a spot where I don't really want to attack a lot. Like, I don't want to bet range on this board, personally. I think some players might, but I don't. But what I do like about this hand are my suits. The exact suits match the suits on the board, so it would make it way less likely that this player continues. So bluffing with this type of a hand makes a lot of sense. I also like bluffing with ace 10 more than I like ace jack, ace queen, ace king, just because I could possibly get him to fold out a hand like ace jack or ace queen, maybe. And it's just a bit further down, right? Like, if I have ace king, it's just, for me, it's too high up, and I'd rather just check. So I would like to see a bet here. If I remember correctly, and I would always bet a third. I wouldn't bet big on this board. Yep, so I bet a third. Player called. Turn, they check. And at this point, my strategy here, maybe there is some small betting that comes in on this board. Actually, now that I think about it, there probably is. I think in most times in poker, it's like either bet big or check on the turn in these types of scenarios, but I think on this paired board, that might not be the case. Anyway, this hand, I don't want to bluff with this hand. I have like way worse hands to bluff with. Like, I have potentially like queen high and king high. I could bluff with all of those. And then maybe hand like ace 5 if I still have that. So I have worse hands than this, and then I also have better hands to value bet, so it kind of puts it right in the middle. So I just always check this hand. On the river, like, I'm not going to bluff. I'm not really thinking I'm going to get a worse hand to call me, and I'm also not going to get a better hand to fold. So I don't think bluffing here makes sense. So I check back, and then they have ace queen. But kind of to my point about why I like betting the flop with ace 10 over ace king is, like, I maybe could get a hand like ace queen or ace jack to fold. Kind of my line of thinking. I think some people might have other opinions, which I'm open to. If you do have an opinion, like, put it in the comments below. I definitely want to see what people are up to, and I always like to run my thought process up against other people and see, where I could play better or something like that. So with that, we can keep going. So that was ace 10 off. Shocker. In a tournament that I won, I'm going to show you pocket aces. So I raise. Was this a raise and take? No. So I raise and the small blind calls. So we see a 9 deuce deuce. Check. I'm pretty much always going to bet small here, like, with my whole range. I think if I ever wanted to check a value hand back, like, this would be the exact one to do it with. And I would never check back kings through 10s. I would just always bet all of them. But maybe I would check this sometimes, but probably not. I'd probably just bet my whole range here. Yeah, so I bet a third, like I said I would, or 30% is what my bet sizing is. They called. They checked the turn. I mean, kind of similar reasons to before. If I ever wanted to check the turn back with a strong hand, like, this would be the exact one to do it with. But I also think sizing geometrically to get stacks in makes sense. So betting something like 80% a pot here so that I could bet 80% a pot all in on the river definitely makes sense. I'm good with both. So, yep, kind of to my point, I bet 75% it looks like, and they fold. Next, the very next hand, I get aces again. This might have been a raise and take. I can't remember. Yep, raise and take. No action with the aces. Okay. The next big hand. So I limp, and they check. And we see this board. I'm pretty 50-50 between betting and checking here. I don't think I want to bet always all the time. But I also think being aggressive is going to be pretty good on average here, because I think people, I don't know anything about this player, but I think the general population is pretty weak, especially blind versus blind, and they just fold too much. So I think betting kind of overperforms. But I think checking this hand also makes a lot of sense. The reason for that is if I have the best hand now, I don't really need too much protection. Granted, if they have a hand like, I don't know, 7-8, like, yeah, they have 6 outs. But they would have to hit their 6 outs and then have me not hit the river or the turn, like, whichever order you want. So that's basically what I'm trying to say is like I don't need that much protection. Um, and I also can't really get called by too many worse hands, I don't think. I'm probably supposed to, but I don't think people do. So I think checking this hand makes a lot of sense. We see the flop bet. I could check raise, honestly. I wouldn't hate it. I actually kind of like it the more I'm looking at this. And something like, if we were playing this hand right now, I might actually do that. I think it works with having the suits on board, makes a lot of sense, having a gut shot. But maybe I do want to just use a worse hand, so like Jack 10 might be a little bit better. Or 4-5, or if I have that, like 5 deuce, 4 deuce. So making the call, I'm never folding this hand ever. So he's going to check the turn now. And then against this bet, this is pretty worrying. I don't think I want to call here much. I know that I do because I know the result of the hand. But I don't think calling here is going to be very profitable. Yes, I have implied odds and we're very deep, but check calling a gut shot out of position is generally a no-no. So I don't really like it really at all. I think this is pretty poor. Definitely always going to check any river regardless of what it is. And that's kind of the point of like why check calling a draw out of position is so bad, is just because I'm going to check my range on the river. And so when I whiff, I can't win the pot. But anyway, we catch the large bet, and I remember hearing game kind of contemplating sizings between like, you know, should I just raise like 3x to like, you know, 27K, or should I jam? And ultimately, I think both plays have pretty similar EV. But in game, I was like, I really want to get called by one pair ace X or a 2 pair. So I'm just going to make it 27K and always get called by those hands. So that's what I did. I made it 29K. I mean, looking at this with like what I left behind, I don't know. I kind of think I should just jam. But again, it can never be bad when you're raising with the nuts. So looking at the result of the hand, obviously if I knew he had a set, I would want to jam. But that's super results oriented. So that's that hand. We can keep moving. What do we got next? I wrote out like a little list just so I don't have to scroll through every single hand. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I did want to show this. Um, so this will be a pretty quick hand, but my big blind 3-bet range is going to be pretty polarized, meaning like my value range might look something like 10s plus ace king, and then my bluff range is going to be really polarized, like ace deuce off, king 4 off, queen 6 off, those types of hands. And I think the reason why I'm showcasing this is people are generally pretty uncomfortable with doing that just because they're really terrible hands, and they're like, oh, I'm out of position, the raise size has to be really big and it's really scary. But that's just the strategy that I've learned. And another thing too is like, it's one thing to know it, but then it's also another thing to actually pull the trigger in spots. I think this is the perfect spot because Kevin here is raising the cutoff. They're going to have a pretty wide range. Also having a 7 specifically is way better than like something like queen 9, where like I would block the worst hands he would open, like 10-9 off, jack 9 off. But having the queen 7, I don't really block their worst hands. So I think 3-bet bluffing this makes a lot of sense, and it worked. I think this was a pretty standard 3-bet spot. 3-bet shove, right? No, I didn't. Okay, so I didn't shove. So this is pretty interesting. You don't really encounter this too much where the small blind just min raises. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But basically what I would tell someone is just don't let this work, basically. Don't fold versus this and be pretty aggressive with the 3-bets. So here, I 3-bet to a pretty big size. I would have liked to see it be 15K, so just 3x. But at this point, even if this player shoves, I'm not going to fold ace jack off blind versus blind here. So if they happen to have a better hand, GG. Let's see. This hand I don't think was very interesting. I just raised the button, c-bet the flop, and that was it. So we can go to this ace-queen. This is spicy. I don't think I remember this hand. So we see a raise from middle position. I'm pretty 50-50 here between flat and 3-bet. How deep are we? Okay. Like 25 maybe? Yeah, about 25 bigs. If I do 3-bet, I'm 3-bet stacking off. I'm not going to 3-bet fold ace-queen off here, so I would 3-bet to stack off, or I would flat. And I bias pretty heavily toward flatting in this spot. Just because I really do think at this point I've studied a lot of post-flop poker and think that I do have an edge there. I didn't used to think that was always the case, but that's why I'm pretty comfortable in single raise pots, especially from the button playing any flop. So we see a bet here. This is pretty uncomfortable not having a spade. And to be honest, if I looked at this now, I think I should probably just fold without the spade. But it's really close. I don't think calling is bad. Like, I don't think it's punting or anything, but I think it could be pretty clean to just say, like, hey, if I have a spade or backdoor hearts, I'll continue. So I call, we see the turn jack, the player checks. And at this point, it's quite interesting, you know, what they could have here, because I think a lot of hands are very natural barrels. So, like, pocket queens, kings, aces, ace jack if they have it, king jack, king queen, even like queen 9 and 9-8. There are quite a lot of bluffs and a lot of value hands for them to pick from. And then so the checks, I think, get kind of specific. And what I mean by that is, like, they have ace king and then they have a lot of 10x and under pairs. I just don't think people, at least from my reads, I don't think people are very good about checking over pairs or top pairs here. So when I see the scenario, I'm not surprised to see myself pull the trigger, just because I really don't think I have all that much showdown at this point on this turn, like, given the action. So I am pretty comfortable. I am high up, but I am pretty comfortable bluffing like this. So we bet and get called, and then the river is a complete brick, and they check. Not having a spade is pretty good, I think, for bluffing. But the problem, though, is I think I do have way worse hands here. Like, I think I have, you know, 9-8 and maybe some 9-7 and 7-8 and maybe some queen 9 and some king queen. So I think that's enough where I should just bluff that. And then if I'm bluffing this too, it might just be too much bluffing. I don't think it's bad. I do think pulling the trigger is going to be pretty good, especially the way that I described this player's range, at least what I think it is. I think pulling the trigger is going to make a lot of sense, but I'm not really comfortable with it. I would say I'm, like, pretty mixed. But I did pull the trigger and get it through, so that's cool. Let's keep going. Let's see. What do we got next? This was a standard 3-bet from the button. Not really too much to discuss. So they raise, I 3-bet, they fold. That's more standard for me, and I would 3-bet fold this hand. The thing with ace queen off is, like, it's too good to 3-bet fold, but it's not really good enough to 3-bet stack off. So I flat it, basically. So let's see. The next hand is a flip win, I think. Let's see. Ooh, what happened here? Okay, so the cutoff raises. Oh, wow, we're pretty short here. This is only... I can't do any math. Like 12 bigs? Yeah, I have like 12 bigs or something. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I have like 14 bigs, maybe 15. So we see the raise and the shove. This is pretty dicey, to be honest. I think it might be the bottom. Like, I don't know if I would go with sevens, and I would definitely go with nines. So it is the rubber band hand. So I'm fine if someone folded this, kind of. I do prefer to run it, I think. But that's kind of where I'm at. And they have ace king, and we win the flip. Next hand, I don't remember this hand. Oh, I do remember this hand. Yeah, because I remember on stream I was saying, like, yeah, I don't really limp too much, to be honest. But we saw the limp here, and I didn't really want to ISO this hand just because if I get flatted really from anywhere, it's going to be pretty terrible for me post-flop. And I just thought limping along, it might have been a little exploitative just seeing the players behind. I was like, I don't think I'm going to get squeezed all that often. So I'll just limp behind. I don't think it's amazing, but I also don't think it's that bad. So we flop a set. This player bets half pot. In a four-way pot, I think I should just call here. I really hope I don't raise because the board is so dry. And I'm in position. I wouldn't really do too much raising here, I don't think. So I would want to call. Yep. Pretty safe turn. It does kill action, but it's pretty safe in that I still don't lose really ever. And then here, what are these SPRs? Yeah, I would just like to see myself bet half pot, just like 50,000. I think that's pretty good. Yep, shocker. Get the call. The river I'm really not too pleased about. I don't know how much 7-8 is there, but there's definitely a good amount of flushes with like 9x and hearts is definitely there quite a bit. 5x of hearts definitely there quite a bit. So I remember tanking on this river and like really not knowing what to do. But then ultimately being like, they have a lot of combos of two pairs that I think we'll still call, and maybe I'll get heroed by, an ace if they have it. So all in. And plus the SPR too played a factor into that. And we do get heroed by the ace, which is quite nice and something I was not expecting, but NH. Let's see, what do we got next? I don't remember this hand. So I raise the cutoff, big blind calls. I'm always going to bet small on this flop with basically my whole range. We get called. Honestly, at this point, I think that this player's range looks like some straight draws, like maybe Jack 10, maybe Jack 9, and maybe Ace 10 if they didn't 3-bet. But it really looks like, a king or a queen, basically, is kind of what I would think. So, and also the fact they're in the big blind, like this turn is not as worrying because they have so much like king 5 and queen 4. It doesn't mean that they only have like queen jack or king queen or something. Their range isn't that tight, obviously. So pretty comfortable in having the best hand at this point, and I'm just going to go for all of it. I mean, not all at once on the turn, but I'm just going to size the turn appropriately where I can jam the river. Or at least that's what I would have wanted to do. Yeah, it looks like I did do that. Okay, cool. So we see that river, and then I would definitely just always jam, and then they fold. Maybe I could talk about how I would bluff here. I don't even know. I guess ace high is the only way I would bluff here. Or maybe like if I had 10-8 or 9-8. Those would make pretty good bluffs too, because I would block, rivered boats with like queen 8 specifically. But again, that's like pretty specific. We can watch myself get lucky again, I think. So this player limps. How deep are we? We're really short. So yeah, this is pretty standard for me as far as jamming. I mean, what is this, like 6 bigs, 7 bigs? I know it's way less than 10, so I would definitely always jam. And then I get lucky on the flop, so that sounds good to me. Get aces, no action. Ace six. Oh, the famous hand. The very, very famous hand. So at this point, I think we might have been final 3 tables. We're getting really deep in the tournament. And I don't know what average stack was at this point, unfortunately. But I know that we were very deep. I think it was final. It might have been almost final 2 tables. It was probably final 3. But anyway, the Whitesmith, a great guy, really funny guy. He streams a lot. Go check him out on Twitch. He's really hilarious. He raised, and I was sitting here debating what I wanted to do. I felt like there was a lot of pressure I could put on, given the situation that he still had a pretty big. Like, I have a big stack here, but he still has a lot of equity in this tournament with an average stack and in being like final 2, final 3 tables. And I was thinking, I would flat like ace 5, ace 4, ace 3 because they play better post flop with the wheel ability. But ace 6 specifically, I was like, well, it's like kind of the worst ace and it's suited, so I can just jam. But I didn't think I was like pretty 50-50 and almost didn't pull the trigger. And the really interesting thing was he snapped me off so fast where I really thought it was kings. And I was just really surprised. And he made a great play. Like, he knew exactly where I was at, and he had ace 10 off here. And unfortunately for him, got really unlucky on the flop, and I held. So that was a huge pot. I mean, this I think was a chip lead pot for me, which was just crazy fortunate. You're gonna need that to win a tournament, obviously. But yeah, pretty nuts and pretty sad for Whitesmith. But like I said, great dude, and definitely go check him out. What else we got? There's another one before this, I thought. Oh no, that was the second ace 6. So he sucked out with ace 6 twice. Cool. So we got this king queen. This is interesting, I think. This is very interesting. This is real spicy. Just the whole hand, honestly, in general. I mean, I would definitely 3-bet here quite a bit with this hand, and given the fact it's final 2 tables. The reason why I like this hand so much is because I don't mind 3-bet folding it. It's not like I'm 3-bet folding something like ace-jack suited. That has a ton of playability. It's an offsuit hand. It really heavily blocks the way that this player would 4-bet. So that would mean it's blocking pocket queens, pocket kings, ace-king, ace-queens. That's all pretty good for me. So I do like 3-betting here on the button. And he calls, and we see this board, which is really interesting. And I don't remember what I did, but I think I would want to check this back. I don't do a lot of checking in position in 3-bet pots, like almost ever. But on this exact board with this exact hand, I don't want to bet fold, and I definitely don't want to bet call. It's just kind of like right in that sweet spot, right? Where like I would bet fold a hand if I had like king queen with no spade. Like I would be very happy to bluff the flop because I basically have no way of winning the hand otherwise. But king queen with a spade is just really a lot of equity to bet fold, having the gut shot and the flush draw. So not surprised to see myself check back. I think at this point my read would be if this player had an 8, that they would always bet it. And if they had a flush, they might mix some flushes to check, but I think most flushes bet. So my read is that they're like pretty capped here in this 3-bet pot. So I check it back. And then on the river, if you think about this, for me, I just don't have any worse hands to bluff. They don't exist. Like I don't have queen high. I don't have, the next worst hand is 5 high. So like this is the only way to bluff on this river. So I'm just always going to take it pretty much every time. And then as far as sizing goes, I'd probably stick to half pot because if I have ace king, that's what I would want to bet to. And that's my most likely holding. So I would just bet half here. Yep. Got it done. I think that was a pretty cool hand. That might have been maybe my favorite hand so far. I think that one's pretty cool. Looks like this was another bluff opportunity. So we see the min raise. I'm always going to call this hand. I'm not going to 3-bet and I'm not going to fold. So, and I'm always going to check the flop over to them. They check it back. Yep, turn is pretty good. It pretty much gives me the green light to, I would always bet a 7, an 8, a deuce if I have it, and all my straight draws. And I might be over bluffing here, maybe, but I don't think it matters very much. So I bet and they call, and the river's a 4, which is actually pretty good because it fills 5-6, which I do think is pretty important. And it just cuts down on the ways that I bluff, basically. So, like, I would bluff now with, like, 9-6 and 9-5 and 10-9. And Jack-9 does start to get a little high up, but I don't have showdown value, and I just don't think people are very good about heroing ace-high. So I like betting. Anywhere between half pot and 3/4, I think is good. Yeah, it looks like I went for the 3/4 size. I think it's good. See what happened here. So they raise the button with like about 30 bigs. I don't hate shipping it here because of the stack that I have. If I had like 1.2 million, I wouldn't like it very much, just because I have so much equity at this stage in the game, with a stack like 1.2 million, and if I lose, I'm just pummeled, right? Like I have crumbs left. But with the 1.5, even if I lose, I would still have 600,000. So yeah, that wouldn't be ideal, but I don't think shipping it in here is that bad versus a button open. In ICM dense scenarios, I do get pretty sensitive with like lower pairs, I think more than most people, but calling is obviously a good option as well. So we check, they check it back. I'm always going to bet this turn with this hand. I feel pretty comfortable. Yep. And I'm always going to bet the river as well. And sizing, yeah, I think half pot is fine. Could maybe go bigger, but I think it's good. Get the call. And they have a 5. So tough hand for them. Not really too much they could do, in my opinion. Now we got these pocket 8s versus king queen. This might have win in pre-flop, maybe? No. Oh, no, it's pretty deep. Okay, so we raise, they call, we flop a boat. I think in this situation, I would check, like, I don't know about jacks, but I would definitely check queens, kings, and aces. And I'd want to bet, like, 8s, 9s, 10s, and jacks. So that's where I'm at with the pairs. So not surprised to see myself bet small here. We see a call. The turn is pretty good, and I can definitely lose to pocket 7s, pocket 9s, pocket 10s, but that's pretty much it. I don't think they have, obviously I'm not going to think that they have a 5 much. So I think betting here for more protection is going to be pretty good. I would just still bet a third. So I am pretty surprised to see myself check. I would have liked to bet. I might have checked just because I was pretty scared about those hands I listed beating me, and we were really deep in this tournament, so I didn't want to put too much money in. That was probably what was going through my head. And pretty good river. I would definitely bet for value here. You got to bet a third here, man. Let's go. All right, good. Good to see. We bet and we get called by king high. So it's always good. All right, let's see. Oh yeah, this one I wanted to bring up because this was really questionable. I don't really remember this hand. So they limped and I checked. They bet here with 3 to a straight, so like the 10, 8, 9, and the heart and the overcard to the 9. I'm always going to call here. I think this is a spot where a lot of people, blind v blind, they play really passively, and it's a spot I would take advantage of, but for me here, I'm not going to fold this, so I call. Interesting turn card. I could start to bluff, definitely. But I have a lot of different hands to bluff from. So I do need to be mindful about which ones I pick. And it might be better to pick a hand like 10-5 or 10-4 if I have it. or like 6'4" or 6'5". Like those are, in my opinion, better candidates than this. This isn't terrible though, but I don't hate checking it either. I think having the heart I would want to check quite a bit just because I would block how they fold. So I check, and then I river an 8 and they check, and this was questionable to me. I don't know if I should really consider value betting here. I do think it's kind of unlikely that I'm beat. They could definitely have a 9 though, which is a concern, and they could definitely have a flush. I don't really expect them to have an ace or better. But in position here, the cost of betting and reopening the action and opening myself up to getting raised is very expensive. Even though it doesn't happen that often, it is pretty expensive. So with this weak of a hand, I think there's more value in just checking it back, showing it down, seeing do we have the winner. But I did go for the half pot bet. I would never bet less than half pot. It's just a general rule that I follow. And they fold. So I think that bet's pretty questionable, to be honest. And then now we have the big, big hand. This hand happened right before the final table. So that's why I'm raising up the 5s here. We're short-handed. We're only 5-handed, and we're on the FT bubble. So I raise, we get a flat, and a flat. So we go 4 ways to a pretty nice flop. Pretty scary, but pretty nice. Actually, not really that scary now I look at it, because I was worried about the big blind, but they're pretty short here. So I don't really care about this player. So they bet like this all in. I'm just really, what I'm thinking about now is like, do I want to just call this, or do I definitely want to raise always? I think with this exact hand, I just want to raise. There's way too many draws out there that I should protect against. So I think I like raising more than I like calling, but both I think are fine. So I do stick in the raise. This player calls. We see the 9 on the turn. They check. The pot already has 900 in the middle, 900,000. They have 900,000 behind. I could make a case for betting smaller actually in position, because if I did have a bluff, I don't think I would want to shove it. Just because if I'm beat, I'm dead. But maybe not though, because maybe I just have really equity driven bluffs, like a6 of diamonds or something. So maybe the move is just to always shove here. I'm pretty good between betting 300K and shoving. So I do shove. They do call it off. They have ace high, which this deep in a tournament, I don't know if I would be able to call off ace high here. It just seems tough to have the best hand, at least for me. And when it's the final table bubble of a ring event, I don't know if I would call it off, but I also don't know if it's really that bad, because they have so much equity, and if they win this pot, they have a really good chance at winning the event. So it's a tough spot, but I'm not really too sure what the best play is. And we hold. And so that brings us to the final table. So I hope you guys enjoyed part 1. I'm definitely going to make part 2 of the final table. And if you guys have any comments about how I play, if you think it was terrible, let me know. And I look forward to seeing you in part 2. Peace.